There is a piece of wood sitting somewhere in your house right now that is, physically, a bomb. Not metaphorically, not poetically. A bomb. With a timer, nobody set, holding years of raw energy, completely stable, completely harmless, until you touch it with a flame. Then it detonates in slow motion, in front of your face, and you call it cozy. That sounds like a wild claim. It isn't the wild part. The wild part is what's actually being released when that happens. Because it is not what you were taught in school, and once you see it, you cannot watch a candle the same way again. Here's the promise, and I'm not going to bury it under 10 minutes of setup. By the end of this video, you will understand why fire cannot be weighed, why it leaves nothing behind when it stops, and why one of the strangest facts in basic physics is that fire is not being created at all when you light a match. It's being released, and the thing being released connects in a very direct and testable way to satellites in orbit, particles falling out of the sky, and even the wire running through your wall right now. Stay with this one, because by the end, the word fire is going to mean something completely different to you than it did 30 seconds ago. Here's the setup. Fire looks like an object. It has an edge. It has a color. It moves the way something alive moves. Your brain files it away next to rock and dog, a thing in the world made of something. That categorization is wrong, and not in a small way. Fire fails almost every physical test you'd apply to a real object. You cannot weigh it. You cannot hold a piece of it and set it on a table the way you can with a rock or a coin. Its edge is different a tenth of a second from now than it is right now. Measure it twice, and you'll get two different answers, every time, no matter how carefully you try. So here's the actual question this video is going to answer, and it's harder than it sounds. If fire isn't an object, what is it? Hold that question. You'll need it in a minute, because the answer is not what you think, and it gets worse before it gets better. Let's start with the log. Before it ever meets a flame, that log spent years doing something almost nobody thinks about. Sunlight hit the leaves of the tree it came from, day after day, season after season, and the tree used that light, actual packets of solar energy arriving one photon at a time, to force carbon dioxide out of the air and water up from the ground into a shape neither of them naturally wants to hold. That's the part that should bother you. Wood isn't just plant material in the vague textbook sense. It is sunlight, physically bent into a solid, load-bearing structure, and left sitting there, stable, for years, sometimes decades, without doing anything at all. This is a simplified explanation to make the core idea intuitive. The actual biochemistry involves dozens of intermediate steps. But the underlying physics is real, and it's the part that matters here. That log is a battery, not a metaphor. A battery, in the same functional sense as the one in your phone, just built out of carbon instead of lithium. And right now, somewhere, a log exactly like that is sitting in a garage or a woodpile, fully charged, doing absolutely nothing. So here's the problem, and it's the first real crack in the story. If it's really storing that much energy, why doesn't it just go off on its own? Why does a woodpile sit there for years, through summer heat and dry seasons, without spontaneously catching fire? That question is the whole video. Keep it running in the back of your mind, because the answer to it is also the answer to why a match works at all. Now you strike a match and touch it to the wood. Pause the video here and actually predict, before I tell you, at the level of atoms, what gets destroyed, what gets created. Don't just nod along, actually picture it. Most people, when they try, picture something being erased. Fire eating the wood. The log getting smaller because pieces of it are vanishing. Most people answer the same way. Fire eats the wood, and whatever's left over, the ash, is somehow less than what you started with, as if fire deleted a chunk of the universe on the spot. That answer feels obvious. It's also completely wrong, and the real answer creates a much bigger problem than the one you started with. Here it is. Nothing is destroyed. Nothing new is created. Not one atom, anywhere, at any point in the entire process, from the first spark to the last glowing ember. The carbon and hydrogen locked into that wood are simply swapping partners, tearing away from each other and pairing instead with oxygen pulled in from the surrounding air, becoming carbon dioxide and water vapor, both invisible, both drifting silently off into the room around you. That's why it looks like matter disappears. It doesn't disappear. It just turns into a gas you can't see and floats away before you can catch it doing so. That sounds like a clean, satisfying answer. It is not the real answer. It's only half of it. And the missing half is where this stops being a chemistry lesson and starts being genuinely unsettling. If no new matter is created, where does the light come from? Where does the heat that can melt skin, that can warm an entire room, actually come from? That's the real question, and the answer is the reason a 2-inch gap decides whether fire warms your hand or scars it for life. Chemical bonds store energy the way a compressed spring stores energy. Sunlight, years ago, compressed that spring and locked it into the shape of the wood, one photon at a time, patiently, with no urgency at all. The bonds in carbon dioxide and water vapor, the stuff the wood turns into the moment it burns, are relaxed, low energy, the spring released. That difference between compressed and released cannot just disappear into nothing. Energy does not vanish. It never has, not once in the entire recorded history of physics. It has to go somewhere, and it goes somewhere all at once, released as light and heat in seconds after sitting quietly stored for years without moving. That sounds bad. It isn't the bad part yet. The bad part is what this actually means. Fire is not being created when you strike that match. It was already there the entire time, sitting in the woodpile, in the drawer, in the log by your fireplace. You didn't start a fire. You opened something that was already loaded and had been loaded since before you were born. At this point, most people think they've got the full picture. Fire equals sunlight released. That's true. And it's also where physicists would tell you the real trouble starts, because if fire is just released sunlight, it should behave like sunlight. It doesn't. Sunlight is gentle. It warms your skin slowly, over minutes, without ever crossing a line into danger unless you sit in it for hours. It doesn't have edges. It doesn't roar. It doesn't consume a house in 20 minutes flat. So what is fire physically that lets years of gentle, patient sunlight suddenly behave like something completely different? Fast, violent, and dangerous in a way sunlight itself never is. Here's where it gets stranger. Fire isn't matter in the sense of being a solid, a liquid, or a gas. None of the 3 categories you learned in school actually fit it cleanly. It's 2 separate things stacked on top of each other, and neither one by itself is really fire. There's a thin, active chemical reaction zone, invisible and razor narrow, where fuel vapor and oxygen are actually combining in real time. And there's a glowing cloud sitting just above and around that zone, mostly soot particles and superheated gas, hot enough to radiate visible light, the exact same basic physics that makes a metal rod glow orange-red when a blacksmith heats it in a forge. Neither the reaction zone nor the glowing cloud is, on its own, what you'd call fire. What you're calling fire is the 2 of them happening at once, in the same place, feeding each other. And at extreme temperatures, flame stops obeying even that 2-part description and starts behaving like a weak plasma, with electrical properties that don't fit neatly into anything we've discussed so far. Physicists are still actively studying that boundary today, in labs right now. For this video, hold on to the simpler version. It's already enough to break your intuition wide open on its own. Now think about the shape. Every flame you've ever seen, every candle, every campfire, every gas stove burner, points the same direction, up. Pause again and predict before I answer it. Why? Tip the candle sideways, tilt it as far as it'll go without spilling wax. The flame still points up. Every single time, without exception. It feels like fire has intent, like it's reaching for something above it, straining toward the ceiling on purpose. Here's the disturbing part. It has no intent at all, not even a little. The direction is not coming from the fire itself. It's coming from something completely outside it. Gravity, pulling cool, dense air downward and letting hot, less dense gas rise in its place, dragging the visible flame into that narrowing teardrop shape the exact same way gravity lifts a hot air balloon off the ground. Take gravity away completely, and something genuinely strange happens. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station have actually watched this happen on camera, in real experiments designed specifically to test it. In orbit, a flame stops being a teardrop entirely. It becomes a small, dim, nearly spherical ball of blue light, barely recognizable as fire at all to someone who's only ever seen it on Earth. Every campfire you've ever sat in front of, every candle you've ever blown out at a birthday party, every match you've ever struck, the shape was never really about fire. It was gravity, quietly running the entire show, the whole time, without you ever once noticing it was even involved. Here's another assumption worth breaking, because it sounds scientific and usually isn't. You'd think the different colors inside a flame mean different chemicals are burning. That blue somehow means one substance, and orange means another. Fireworks genuinely do work that way, using metal salts to produce specific colors on purpose. But an ordinary candle doesn't. The blue you'll spot near the base of a candle flame marks the hottest part of the entire flame, where fuel vapor and oxygen are mixing efficiently and burning almost completely, releasing energy cleanly with very little visible soot. And it's the part almost nobody actually notices because it's small, thin, and dim compared to everything above it. The tall, showy, dramatic yellow-orange part rising above it is actually cooler and less efficient combustion. Unburned carbon particles drifting upward as soot, glowing before they finish reacting or simply float away unburned into the air of the room. In other words, the flame has been quietly lying to you your entire life about where the real energy actually is. The part that looks weakest, smallest, and least impressive is doing the most work. The part that looks the most impressive, the tallest and brightest, is largely waste, glowing on its way out the door. So, if fire is just released, stored sunlight, wrapped in a fragile, gravity-shaped process that's lying to you about its own colors, here's where this stops being only about candles. The exact same underlying principle, matter and energy behaving in ways that look flatly impossible from the outside, is running above your head right now, today, in machinery you trust with your life every single time you drive somewhere. GPS satellites carry atomic clocks accurate to billionths of a second, engineered with a precision most people never think twice about. Those clocks do not run at the same rate as identical clocks sitting on the ground beneath them. Moving at high speed and sitting farther away from Earth's gravity, both shift how quickly time passes for the satellite relative to you, exactly as relativity predicts, down to the decimal point, verified constantly by the very system you use to find your way home. If engineers didn't correct for that effect deliberately, continuously, your GPS error would grow by several miles within a single day, enough to send you into a field instead of your driveway. You've never seen this happen. There's no flame here, no glow, no visible clue at all on your phone screen while it happens. But it is exactly as real, and honestly exactly as strange, as watching a log turn into light and heat directly in front of your eyes. It gets stranger still. Somewhere in the upper atmosphere over your head right now, particles called muons are being created constantly, the moment cosmic rays from deep space slam into air molecules miles above the ground. And on paper, according to their own known lifespan, they shouldn't survive long enough to reach the ground at all. They decay too fast. Far too fast mathematically to make the trip down before falling apart. And yet detectors sitting at sea level pick them up constantly, streaming silently through the roof of the very room you're sitting in as you watch this. The only reason they survive that impossible trip is that at the speed they're traveling, time itself runs measurably slower for them than it does for you, standing still on the ground. Something is dying, and somehow, simultaneously, not yet dying, above your head, right now, at this exact moment, and the only reason that makes any sense is a rule about time itself that nobody ever taught you to notice in ordinary life. Even something as mundane and unremarkable as electricity is hiding the exact same kind of trick. Flip a light switch, and the bulb across the room responds almost instantly, with no perceptible delay at all. But the actual electrons inside that wire are crawling forward at a genuinely embarrassing pace, sometimes just inches per hour, slower than a snail, slower than most things you'd ever consider moving at all. What travels fast through the wire isn't the electrons themselves sprinting from the switch to the bulb. It's an electric field, rippling through a wire already packed edge to edge with electrons, nudging all of them nearly simultaneously along the entire length of the circuit at once. The wire running through your wall has been quietly lying to you about how it actually works for your entire life, every single time you've flipped a switch without a second thought. Now go back to the question this whole video has been circling since the very first 30 seconds. Is fire even a thing? By now you already know the answer, and it's more unsettling stated plainly than it sounds when you first hear it. Fire is not an object, not in the sense a rock or a log or a coin is an object. It's a process, fuel, oxygen, and heat, feeding each other in a tight, self-sustaining loop, for exactly as long as all three ingredients hold out and no longer. Remove any single piece from that loop, smother the oxygen, cool the fuel below its ignition point, or take away the fuel source entirely, and the thing doesn't fade out slowly, the way a sound fades or a light dims. It stops instantly, completely, with nothing left over afterward. No residue, no leftover fire stuff sitting somewhere waiting to reignite on its own. Because there was never a physical object there to begin with, only a process happening in a particular place for a particular stretch of time. Blow out a candle at the end of a birthday party, and it feels like you defeated something, like you won a tiny battle against something that was fighting to survive. You didn't. You just proved, in the most ordinary possible way, that there was nothing there to defeat in the first place. Your breath displaced the fuel vapor sitting right at the wick and cooled the reaction zone below the point where the loop could sustain itself, and the moment that loop broke, there was nothing left behind at all, because fire, this entire time, was never really a noun. It was a verb, quietly wearing a noun's disguise for as long as humans have had a word for it. Fire, GPS, muons, electricity. By now it should be obvious that none of these are separate, unrelated mysteries scattered across different corners of physics. They're the exact same mystery, wearing 4 completely different costumes. Every one of them looks, from the outside, looking in with ordinary human intuition, like reality is quietly bending its own rules just this once. None of them are. Every single one is a limit, a precise, exact boundary condition where energy, time, or matter is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, following the rules perfectly, and that lawful behavior simply happens to look impossible from where you're standing, with the intuition you were born with. Fire looks like destruction. It's actually a limit on how stored energy is allowed to escape a chemical structure once it's been unlocked. Relativity looks like something out of science fiction. It's actually a limit on how fast information itself is allowed to travel through the universe. No exceptions, no shortcuts. Nothing here is broken. Nothing here is magic. Every single impossible thing you've just watched, from the flame on your table to the satellites over your head, was a rule running exactly as designed in a place nobody ever told you to look closely enough to notice. That candle sitting on your table right now isn't burning, not in the way you were taught to picture it as a child. It's remembering, releasing, in a handful of violent, glowing seconds, years of sunlight that a tree spent quietly, patiently saving up, 1 photon at a time, with absolutely no urgency at all, long before you ever struck the match. And maybe that's the real lesson sitting inside every flame you'll ever watch flicker again for the rest of your life. Reality doesn't perform magic tricks for anyone, ever, under any circumstances. It just runs its limits so precisely, so consistently, without a single exception, that every so often, one of them happens to look exactly like one.